Welcome to Getting Personal, a monthly podcast diving deep into the stories of the heartbeat of HR. Brought to you by Compt, a global lifestyle benefits platform where companies empower employees with benefits and rewards they'll use and appreciate, whoever and wherever they are in life.
Joining me today is Pete Schramm, CEO and founder of Latitude, a career development and mentorship platform that helps organizations of all sizes improve employee engagement and retention. Thanks for joining me, Pete.
Thanks, Laura. Excited to be here. Hello, everybody.
So, since you are introducing yourself to everybody, tell me more about your background. In case you haven't noticed me poking around your LinkedIn lately and getting those notifications, I saw the words farm to founder, and I thought, hang on a second. It feels familiar as a fellow Pennsylvanian, but how do you go from the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Butler, PA, to big city building teams and tech? Uh, Farm to tech is a really big leap.
I don't know about a big leap. I think that's pretty much what the playbook says, right? You grow up on a farm, you study engineering, you play basketball, you go to Hong Kong, you come back, you build robots, and then you start a tech company, right? So
Very logical, yeah.
yeah, yeah, about as linear as it gets. But it really just goes back to what do I care about most, which is bettering the lives of others. Growing up, that's what mom and dad always shared with me and kind of instilled in me on the farm, right? You work hard, you take care of other people, and you figure everything else out along the way. I was like, okay, cool. Well, I really like this piece of helping people. And I think there's one side of providing, goods to them, right? Fruits and vegetables on the farm and a smile on your face whenever you're a farmer's market, whenever you're 8, 9, 10 years old. And I learned a lot of mental math skills along the way, right? Whenever you're taking the
Mhm.
money, giving people the change back, I'm like, okay, so there's more than just the stuff to do in the field. So this piece of multifaceted personal development which led to a whole bunch of different avenues on the professional development front. So I might be one of the tallest guests that you've had on the podcast. You might have seen some of that in the bio as well. Clocking in at 5'20" every day. And then usually what happens is they say, "Oh my gosh, you're 6'8" for those who are quick on the math. And I usually get a flurry of like 5 to 11 questions, some of which are, did you play basketball? Yes. Are your parents tall? I'd say they're kind of tall, right? 5'5", 6'2". They're not overly huge. I am an anomaly in many ways, and I'm grateful, fortunate, blessed. What is, kind of tough about being tall? Cars, clothes, airplanes, right? If imagine, getting on an airplane, you're like, oh, geez, the seats are the same size for everybody in most of the plane. So interesting thing to think about. But at the end of the day, really cool, grateful, and fortunate. And so as I progressed in my journey of life, I found that the more people I met along the way, the more people I could connect. And then I asked my boss in the professional world, I was like, hey, how can I be the best employee you ever had? And he said, well, go find a mentor. I'm like, great.
Mhm.
Where do I find one? What do I discuss?
Yeah,
How?
they're not just hanging around.
Yeah,
Where do
well,
I start?
I thought they might just be hanging out, waiting around the corner for me, and no, haven't had that experience just yet. And that was really the impetus for pushing everything forward from there. Of okay, there's a gap in the marketplace. There's a gap in how we connect with intention at work. What do we do? Truly the who, what, when, where, why, how of professional development by means of mentoring and connecting with others. So connection is a big, big thing for me.
What was it about having that mentor specifically that set you up for success or set you on this path? Was there like some kind of conversation that they had with you that was like an aha moment?
I think that it was a series of these
Mm.
conversations that built on themselves over time. And I have stacks of notebooks, some there, some here, some there, since the day I graduated from college. And I just take a couple of notes in the different conversations I had along the way. And there's a lot of sticky notes added in there, and other, one pagers and literally napkins, envelopes, all that other stuff, wherever you can take notes. But it was the pieces of, I'd ask them how they got to where they are today, right? So that was kind of the first piece, is figuring out, what opportunities are out there. And then I was able to start to formulate some of the where do I want to go? right? That's what worked for them. What could or should work for me? And then I was able to explore and hone in further on what those were. And then piece together a bit of a plan. I developed my first career map in 2017, 2018, and then I was able to share that with some of these mentors, and they were able to weigh in. So I wouldn't say there was one certain thing that really flipped the script. I talk about a couple of those conversations and interactions in my book, Pathfinders. And you'll see there's a little tractor icon in there, going back to that farm piece of
Hmm.
Pete's perspective, right? So talking about, hey, here's something that, we were able to guide you on, teach you on some educational content. But then here's like a real world scenario, and they're not all like great. There are certain times whenever I did things the wrong way. So the whole approach of avoid this, don't do that, which is another good learning from other mentors along the way is, hey, I did this. This was my experience, Pete, but I'd strongly encourage you to not do that, to avoid that path, that experience, that opportunity, if at all possible.
Yes, the save yourself advice. I
Exactly.
love that. I one thing that you had said stuck out to me where it wasn't just one piece of advice, it was multiple conversations. And I think that's so true about the places that we've been and the path that we're on. It's the pieces and the places that add up to the multiple experiences that add up to the trajectory or the career path that you were trying to plan for yourself. So,
Mhm.
and because you're not short on fun facts, I saw, and you had mentioned that you played basketball with pros. I need to understand the Hong Kong to DC to Western Pennsylvania. What happened and
Well,
how
it's
did each of
just
those things?
well, I'll tell you, it
Yeah.
involved stress relief, pictures of an elephant, and challenge and opportunity in a playground. So I think that's really the gist of it. Now we'll dive into what that means.
Yeah.
So challenge and opportunity is really what guided me from the beginning of my whole journey, right? There's amazing people around me, but I didn't always have the right guides, if that makes sense,
Hmm.
for where I wanted to go, right? They could help in certain capacities, but whenever we think about this from a personal board of advisors perspective, I think let's see if we can get that right here, right? You can see a little image of the personal board behind me there. Um, but that was really the idea. So transferring from a Catholic grade school to a public high school, and then halfway through high school, transferring to a private high school was a remarkable experience. And it's that challenge and opportunity piece. I was fortunate that throughout high school, I was then recruited by more than 80 colleges to play
Wow.
basketball. And it was always, student athlete. You're a student first, academics are first and foremost. And I decided to go to school down in Washington, D.C.
Hmm.
And so I said, whoa, whole new city. And it might sound really cheesy, but it was the fairy tale story of I got on campus and I said, this is the place for me.
Yeah.
Can't explain it any more than that, but that's what happened. More than 70 majors, lots of opportunity. It's 250 acres in DC, but you don't feel like you're entirely in DC in the heart of it. So I kind of had the best of both worlds. And I was able to play basketball and track and study mechanical engineering while I was there. And then fast forward to in the engineering study hall or whatever lab or whatever room it is where you go and do your homework and cram for things with the other people that are smarter than you. Saw a picture of somebody riding an elephant across a river. And at that point, I didn't really know about or is the elephant being taken care of and all those different pieces of it. What I was thinking of, 19, 20-year-old Pete, I said, that looks awesome. Where can I go and do something like that? Challenge and
Yeah.
opportunity. I didn't know that I'd have to leave the country. It kind of made sense, right? But I'd never been out of the country before, right? You got a farm boy from Western Pennsylvania, now in the big city of, we call it Washington, D.C. You might have,
Yeah.
throw the
Yep.
extra R in
Oh,
there,
it's
right?
the
Based on your
Yinzer
roots.
way.
Of course. And I said, well, I want to do that. They said, well, you're going to have to quit sports and you're going to have to do a whole bunch of, reports, applications, things like that. And your second semester, junior year, you're going to be on the other side of the world. Are you ready for that? And at first I
Wow.
said no. And then they showed me the next picture of the person doing something fun. I'm like, okay, I'm in. And so I'd go back and do that 11 times out of 10. First time out of the country, I was able to stay on track with the different the programs that I had, the different coursework. And so here I am, big person in Hong Kong, and I hated it at first. We missed one of our flights. The city was big. It was new. 3,500 people in my dorm. I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck? It's tiny, right? I'm not usually built for many places, especially not places in Asia. But then I said, okay, Pete, come on. You had a day or two to really be sad and down. Let's explore, challenge and
Mhm.
opportunity. And so that was the piece. So fast forward from there a little bit. One of the things I like to do for stress relief is to go shoot hoops, right? So find a playground, find a basketball, and just shoot hoops. And then sometimes people congregate and they would just watch and take some pictures and ask for my autograph. And I'm like, this is too cool. This is also really weird, also really cool. And then I said, well, let's play some pickup. And you could sometimes piece together a little bit of broken English. At that time, I knew no Cantonese. And throughout my 6 months there, I learned how to count to 10 and say some swear words.
The
Um,
most important things, right?
I mean, it's the basics, right? You build on that. And so as I continued to truly immerse myself in the culture, the local basketball players said, hey, why don't you come play with us? And so sometimes if they were missing a person on the team, then I'd be able to stand in with some of the pros. And I never got paid to play basketball, so I can't claim that I was a pro player, but got to play with a fair few of the pro players, which was a lot of fun. And then come back, finish up senior year, and then go into grad school and so on.
I think there's something so interesting about going to a new place, taking yourself completely out of your comfort zone. I did a small version of that when I graduated high school and said, "Get me out of here," and went to
Hmm.
Arizona for college where I had nobody, I had no family, had to figure it out on my own. Got a job and was trying to do the adult thing while being in college. And I think you learn a lot about independence, but you also learn uh, a, a lot of things about teamwork and the importance
Yeah.
of having a support network. So tell me, what did you learn? What did you take from those experiences related to teamwork and leadership that are helping you build a company and then be successful at it?
I think the biggest thing of going to another country where you don't know the lay of the land, you don't know the language, you don't know the people, it's humbling beyond all belief. And so if you're able to say, hey, I can, pick you up and drop you somewhere else, that was what, 2013, so over a decade ago now. So we had phones, but they weren't as connected as they are now. So we were able to get by, but I think the world is a lot easier in that regard. As long as you wield those social skills appropriately and you're comfortable getting uncomfortable and coming out of your box along the way. So I think it was the piece of get comfortable being uncomfortable was a big
Mhm.
piece. Just finding a common ground in any capacity. You'd go, explore, you go sightseeing, and you'd see people from literally all over the world playing basketball. There's a heck of a language barrier, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure you can understand if your teammates are happy with you or pleased with you. You miss a layup, you miss a shot, you turn the ball over, they're going to be pissed, and I would be as well. And so it was, and then what do you do after that? So I think after a team meeting, translating it to the business world, right? You go and get a bite to eat. We do the same thing there, right? And really just being real. Hey, you can do one thing while you're on the court in the boardroom in a meeting, and you can still be the same person, but maybe you're kind of toned back or dialed back a little bit. So I think it was the big piece of learning about how to interact with all different kinds of people. And then you'd go into the engineering classes, you'd interact. I started learning about this thing called networking while I was over there. I'm like, oh, I should probably start to learn what's a full-time job look like for me.
Right.
Um, so those different kinds of pieces, and then always taking time to listen. And that was one of the big things. A lot of the exchange students didn't really care about the locals, for better or for worse. And so they said, "Hey, Pete, you're kind of fun to hang out with." They'd give me a hard time and say, "But not actually, right?" They'd always give me a hard time, which was fun. But they said, "You actually took time to listen to us. Just
Yeah.
because we're locals, most of the tourists say, hey." We don't really need, we're never going to see you again. We're not going to talk to you again. I think it's something similar that we can, translate into the workplace as well, whether we're in the office or not. But think about the admins, think about the people that are cleaning, think about maybe the lower level positions, those things that we take for granted, and maybe we're going to talk to them again, maybe we're not. But to still treat them like regular people, is a really important piece. So that was a consistent theme from the farm through sports, through, all the schooling and college to other countries and things. Everybody's a human, and you're never too big or too important or too fancy or too whatever, put your word in there, to not treat people with respect. So I think that's another thing that we can all take from this.
Tell me more about the road to entrepreneurship. Was there an experience you had, maybe working in corporate America or another company that helped you realize that you wanted to focus on helping not just your colleagues and people that you work with, but people leaders, employee
Mhm.
engagement, like HR teams specifically?
Yeah, I think part of it was frustration and part of it was just Googling, hey, I grew up on a farm and I like basketball and I studied engineering. What do I do next? And it said,
Right.
go start your own company. I was like, oh, cool. Thanks, Google. Really appreciate it. But it was the piece of doing what I love, right? So kind of an intersection of that, and I liken this to the icky guy, right? What does the world need? What are you good at? What can you get paid for? What's helpful to people, right? Those different pieces along the way. And so after facilitating hundreds of connections and introductions to folks, I was like, my goodness gracious, I don't have all the time to do this the right way. I don't have all the answers. And there's got to be an easier way to connect people in the workplace. So with the engineering brain and some of my friends starting companies and a couple of my buddies would talk about, oh, and I still have the notebooks from these conversations. What kind of a business can we start? What kind of ideas do you have? How can we build on that? And I think in your mid 20s, a lot of people start to have those kinds of conversations and figuring out like what else is out there. At work, maybe I'm getting squashed. Maybe I'm losing some of the fire, the spark. I don't get a chance to have that entrepreneurial opportunity
Mhm.
inside my 9 to 5. And so I think that's a big piece for us to, really step back and think about as leaders of organizations. How might we, talk to those folks 3 to 10 years of experience and say, hey, stay interviews, great example. What else might we be able to do for you? So I said, hey, I Googled how to start a company and then moved forward from there. And there are so many things that you don't know
Yeah.
as you go through the process. So it's been remarkable. Just every day is a high, low. It's a roller coaster ride, right? Sometimes you're like, oh, this is getting to be pretty scary, and then sometimes you're going downhill. You're like, things are moving really fast. I don't know exactly what's going on here, but you figure it out. And along the
Yeah.
way, you surround yourself with amazing, remarkable, super smart and talented people to make the journey one more enjoyable, but also to continue increasing your odds of success.
As you are building a team and leading your own people and learning what works and what doesn't work, probably the hard way because there's never an easy way. Um, what have you learned through that experience about driving employee engagement or participation or having creating a culture where people want to show up and be there and enjoy what they do?
Yeah, I think it's a big piece of eat your own dog food, drink your own Kool-Aid, whichever phrase or slogan you like to adopt. It's really around if we can't find value and benefit in the technology and what we're building, then how in the world are we going to be comfortable and be able to sleep at night if we're providing this to people that'll, pay and invest
Mhm.
in this technology and this solution? So I think that's a big piece is continuing to stay grounded and rooted in this and to have the internal piece. Hey, we have fun as a team. We have great trust, respect. Um, those foundational values. We're vulnerable with one another, right? But make sure to always add in some of those fun pieces. And the first thing, whenever somebody calls for an interview, they're exploring an opportunity here. I said, well, we'll get to the work stuff. Just tell me about you and where you are now, where you've been, and where you want to go. And that's a big piece because are you going to retire at Latitude? Probably not. Am I going to retire at Latitude? Probably not. And so it's that piece of how can I give you my word that says we're going to help you continue to grow, flourish, and develop because that's what we're all about at this organization. So we have to do it for each one of our people as well. And that, believe it or not, helps us find out ways to better provide to our partners and customers and clients along the way as well.
I was going to ask that. I imagine walking the walk gives you some
Yeah.
insight on how things could be or should be in other organizations. What are you learning about other companies as you're explaining what you do and explaining, the reason why they need a solution like Latitude.
So I've learned that big brands and large logos are not all created equal whenever it
Yeah.
comes to walking the walk and or talking the talk, right? I forget what the latest statistic is. 93% of Fortune 500 companies have a mentorship program. And you would not believe, maybe you would believe, but maybe most people wouldn't believe, how many are just run on Excel or
Oh
just an
god,
idea or a
no.
concept. And you're just like,
Yeah.
it's what? It's like, yeah, a stretch assignment, and so was working on it before, and now it's my job, and I got to find somebody else to give a stretch. I got a hypo over here, somebody that came out of one of the LDPs, and they're going to be able to run with this until they then leave the organization because they were overworked, burnt out 4 times over, and it's just that piece of, okay, are you an expert in this stuff? Do you have the resources and abilities and the expertise to drive this through to closure? Do you care about this? And so organizations, some of them don't actually care about investing in their people. And what I mean by that is they might talk about it, but whenever we're going to do something, I just did a session earlier today on change management, right? We got to have the right resources. We got to have a plan. We got to have the support, internal, external. We got to have the expertise, all these different pieces. And we have to communicate this success and progress and details, the wins over time. And so you might say to yourself, huh, well, if we're implementing something here, wouldn't it make sense to make sure that we have the what good looks like up front?
Right.
And so that's a big piece of really understanding. I've seen small organizations, couple dozen employees that have a great, career development and mentorship initiative. Do they need our tech? Maybe yes, maybe no, right? But that's the piece where it's not all created equal, and I think it's also um, refreshing for people in those small and medium-sized companies to say, "Hey, I am doing good work. I can push this forward," which is really special. So not all organizations are created equal.
Oh my gosh, you said Excel spreadsheets, and it was like I was having flashbacks
Yeah.
because that is something that we are talking about exactly right now. We did a product launch on professional development, and that is what we are seeing. We are seeing
Mhm.
the smaller companies that, for some reason, are they have it together. They are maybe more forward thinking. They have HR people or L&D teams or even just managers who maybe have experienced the worst of it and have figured out like we need to do this better if we really care about our people. If we want to build a culture from the ground up that is quality, we need to prove that we care about their career development and whether it's here or beyond here.
Yep.
And then the behemoth companies are like, "Well, if we just put it in a LinkedIn job description, no one's really gonna ask about it. It'll get buried in your benefits package, and that's fine. We never have to actually pay for it." It's oh, man, it really brings me down.
But that's how it goes. And then I think you also have the luxury of stability at the larger organizations and the
Yeah.
opportunity for flexibility at the smaller organizations. So I think to get experiences at both is very valuable throughout your professional journey. And I also think that the larger organizations, you can kind of just be a number and they're okay with it. We're going to pay you how much money. We have a whole long list line of people that are ready knocking on our door to come in and work with us. Okay, if you want to leave, go find something else, go figure out if the grass is greener. Maybe it is, but we're not changing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because then you see a lot of headlines and studies that come out about employee retention,
Mhm,
and they are just purging people and cash because we know that there's math behind how much it costs for you to replace a person.
mhm.
But it comes down to, I guess, the what matters to you. The how do you factor in culture to the bottom line, and what does the full employee cycle bring to your organization? Like what kind of value? How do you value those things?
And I think it depends, right? Different organizations, different industries have larger profit margins and have different demographics of people where, they might get in there and stay for a long time. They might be more experienced workforce that they have to think about succession planning. They might be, looking at a much younger, less experienced workforce. And in that regard, they think about, okay, how can we do a lot of onboarding, development quickly? And I think that's an important piece. The other thing to think about is how much is trained, right? So I found it interesting whenever we do work with nurses and physicians and construction and retail and folks that don't necessarily have a desk job. It's
Yeah.
a very different approach there, but they're also trained to do a lot of those things. There is some on the job training, but let's face it, whenever it comes to, software and things like that, after talking to hundreds of different professionals in those fields, they're like, if I can have it on this thing right here, okay, maybe, but to get me to sit down for whatever amount of time in front of a computer, that's next to impossible. Just so you know, I want to set that expectation up front. I'm like, okay. So I think it really just depends. Not all not one size fits all.
So true. My mom is a nurse. I remember when their entire organization switched over to a new platform for patient records and reporting and all of that. And she was just like, I've been here for 30 years and I've never had this much of a problem trying to learn something new. And it is the case for so many people. And even when I would go to doctor's appointments, the nurse or someone at scheduling would say, bear with me, we're on this new system. I'm like, oh, yeah, I know about the system.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
It
Yep.
the training that it takes when you are so busy and don't necessarily have time for training is difficult. It's difficult to reconcile. I want to hear more about your personal experiences and views that were shaped around career mapping and mentorship because we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but I think those are things that are important to everybody in the workplace, various industries that we're talking about, various generations, because we know that the younger people are coming in trying to figure out what does the rest of my career look like. People are staying longer and maybe when they thought they were going to retire, now they're trying to figure out how do I extend my career? Tell me more.
So I think everybody has to get a plan, and start to think about, okay, where do I want to go, and what are some of those pieces that are of interest to me, and then start to bounce those ideas off of other individuals. And you can think about these people are your precursor, right? They're in the mentor sales pipeline, if you will, mentor pipeline. Not everybody's going to get onto your personal board, and I don't think you want to have everybody guiding you in your inner circle. Anybody that wants to dive deeper, go check out Pathfinders. It goes through all this. The where these things came from was trial and error by my side, my experiences. So whenever I talked earlier about some of the what not to do's,
Yeah.
walking into a meeting with somebody that you're asking for advice with zero agenda, zero questions prepared, and nothing to like show them, and you didn't send them anything the day before or 2 days before, that's a big like, don't do it that way. And so, from that trial and error and focus feedback, constructive criticism, people along the way said, "Hey, Pete, why don't you just put this on paper?" And so I was able to then see things. And what's the latest statistic, right? The people who, write down their goals are 40% more likely to achieve them. And the
Hmm.
people that write them down and share them with people over time and report progress are 33% more likely to achieve their goals. So I'm like, okay, hey, I want to do that, right? I want to achieve these goals. And so then it also helps you kind of put things on paper and you can say, okay, so then this and this and this. And then our 5 dimensional career map actually looks at things in various capacities. And so just because I'm having this conversation with you, Lauren, for example, you might be able to help me in like these couple of cells over here, these blocks, right? On whenever it comes to my future um, career positions and skills and education. But whenever it comes to some of the achievements further down on the future, maybe that's not somewhere that you have insight to. So going to somebody like a champion on my board over there. But I think it really just is the piece of find what works best for you and to at least have a plan. It can change over time, but that's a big piece. And then figuring out, not just one mentor. I think people are now of the vein like, hey, yeah, find somebody that can help guide me, talk to successful people. Yeah, mentors were super helpful, impactful along the way. But if one's good, then how about a couple? Diversifying those insights, perspectives, and guidance along the way.
What's your advice to people who might feel intimidated by this process or even like reaching out and asking? for people to help them, guide them, be their mentor. Because it sometimes I realize it could be or feel like a big ask for someone to dedicate their time to help you further your career.
If only there was something that was networking for introverts. Wouldn't that be helpful? So there's a whole section in the book that talks about that piece because believe it or not, I realized along the way that not everybody likes to just walk up to random people like I do and say hello. I got it.
It's my
Okay.
nightmare.
But that's the piece is figuring out how it's not one size fits all. And so
Yeah.
going through that, there's more than 100 people that went through the book and talked through these different concepts with, and I'd given more than, 50 different, keynotes, workshops, presentations. And so that's where you're able to understand what the broader demographic, right? The broader audience is really looking for. So I don't think you have to jump. It's kind of like dating, right? I talk about that a good bit. Not dating advice. Let me be very clear about that, but more so from the piece of, you're going to hang out with somebody for a little bit, figure out, do you interact well? Do you connect well? Are you aligned? And then you say, okay, let's get more serious about this. But there's a process before you truly formalize DTR, right? Define the
Yeah.
relationship. And same thing goes with mentorship, right? Before you DTR and say, hey, now you're on my PBA, let's just use as many words as we can. Um, define the relationship of you being one of my personal board of advisors. Okay. You got to go through those pieces. And so it's as simple as you meet somebody or just somebody that you are closely connected with. It could be your boss, it could be somebody from church, it could be somebody from volunteer work, somebody else that you look up to, maybe somebody on LinkedIn, right? And you could even just say, hey, I'm looking for some advice and guidance. Do you have anybody that's kind of been in my shoes before, maybe a couple of steps ahead of me, that I might just be able to talk to them and learn about their journey? That's a
Yeah.
great way to get started. How much of this have I been talking about my journey over here, right? People just love talking about themselves and things along those nature. So I think that's the biggest piece. And if it's going well, then one of the tips that I share along the way is I might say, hey, Lauren, I really appreciated how you took time to, grab coffee with me. We hopped on a Zoom call. We went and had another meeting together when we were both in the same office that day. Really has been helpful. And you might not realize this or not, but you kind of been like a cross-functional mentor to me. I read this book, Pathfinders, heard this, podcast with Lauren and Pete talking, and it was pretty cool that you're sort of doing that for me, right? Which is very different than saying, "Hey, I need you to do this for me. Please sign up and let's formalize this right from the beginning." But it's a piece that we figure out a little bit over time.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I have figured out along the way, and maybe in hindsight, better than when it was happening in real time, who has been a mentor to me and who I can call back on and rely on for things.
Yeah.
Um, and I was having this thought over the weekend about how far I've come from working in TV news, and now I'm in tech, and thinking about my first boss and all of the things that I learned from him without realizing that I was learning those things, the good things
Mhm.
and the bad. Like
Yeah.
I watched him work way too many hours, late all the time at the expense of his personal life. And then I accidentally followed that same path. And now I'm thinking, oh, yeah, maybe don't do that. And I'm unlearning the bad habits in real time. So it's interesting. I appreciate that advice. And I think a lot of other people will too.
And I think that's a big piece as you're going through the career map. One of the things that we talk about and put some of it into the technology is the what you want, but also the what you don't want. And
Yeah.
being very, very clear with that and talking about from position to position, kind of the start, stop, continue, shift along the
Hmm.
way, but also the why you went into it and why you left it. Because whenever we're getting guidance from others, that's a helpful data point for them as they're continuing to help support us.
Sure. So looking back at your life and career, which makes it sound like you're at the very end of it when really you're like at the precipice. You're continuing to build. Uh, tell me what you think best represents what you're trying to build and where you're going. Is there maybe some story that as you sit and prepare for a keynote or for a podcast or when you were writing your book where you were like, "Man, this is the moment that really changed everything for me or solidified what I believe in and what represents who I am."
I think it just builds and builds and builds
Yeah.
along the way, but there's one that I'll pull out, and it's pretty special and gives a shout out to Steve, one of my buddies. In the book, I realized I talk about 4 or 5 different Steves or Stevens. So if your name's Steve, we're probably going to hit it off well, statistically speaking. But this is somebody who I went out and I asked somebody while I was still in college, hey, I'm exploring these different industries and these kinds of roles. Do you know anybody who went to our school before that I might be able to have a conversation with? And he did the, what the book says, you're at least 4 years ahead of this person. So you take them out to dinner and you pay for their dinner. It's like, yes. And so you have to make sure that if that happened to you, you find somebody to pay it forward to, because we can't stop that chain. But I learned from him and I said, hey, what's it like, right? Figuring things out. And then he was able to provide guidance to me. And that ultimately was one of the pieces that led me into defense contracting. So, okay, pretty cool. And then fast forward a couple of years, he was one of those friends that was starting his own business. And I was like, well, that's so cool. Maybe I'll start my own business, right? There's a lot of other pieces that went into it, and they ended up being one of our first customers. And then he said, hey, I've been a mentor. It was B2C to start. I've been a mentor inside of, your technology. What if I also wanted to get advice from somebody else? I was like, yeah, sure, of course, let's do it. Let's figure it out. And so he was able to connect with other people, have some of those conversations. And I'll never forget it. He sent me a picture of a sticky note that he got one day whenever he was commuting from Philly down to DC. And his daughter woke up early and put a sticky note in his car and said, Dad, when are you going to not be leaving us so much? And he was able to connect to a couple of other people. This is not all just in the software, but just fun things, connecting the right people together. And then a couple days, couple weeks later, he was able to, at the bottom of that same sticky note, send it back to his daughter and wrote today. And so he didn't have to commute. He was able to spend more quality time with his family. And so it was a big piece of understanding, hey, what's working, what's not working, but also to the point that you just alluded to around what's most important and what
Yeah.
should I defend with, all reason. And so that was just one example of, people being connected, staying connected, the roles flipping. So the guidance that we give, receive, up, down, side to side, all around is so, so special.
I got chills when you told me what he wrote on the bottom of that note. I was expecting it, but I didn't expect it to like hit me in that way. Gosh, that is so resonant as I mean, I have an almost 4-year-old and I had some extra days off over the weekend and she was like, "Wait, you get to play with me all day today? We have extra days? I can't believe this." And I was just like, "Wow." It is amazing to get perspective when you least expect it, on what is important, the reminder of what is important. It's the life stuff that contributes to work that makes both things meaningful.
Mhm. Work to live, live to work. And we go through different phases, right? I'm not
Yeah.
saying, hey, everybody, just, hang out and use up all your vacation days immediately, but it's the find the right balance for you at that right phase of your journey.
Yeah. And I love the reciprocity that has happened, the circle of mentorship
Mhm.
and it's not even really a circle, it's kind of the spider web of who can I support and influence that maybe will help me in the future or help me help someone else. And that is something that's really special.
Exactly. One of the first logo ideas, um, 2018, was a spider web kind of concept. I'm like, it's going to be kind of tricky whenever it's blown up and made bigger.
Right?
And then, HubSpot's out there. I'm like, all right, we'll find something else instead.
Yep, that is so true. Well, I at least I was in the right direction. I didn't say something that you were like, "Oh no, not a spider web."
No, no, it's very difficult to say something wrong whenever it comes to people helping people and
Yeah.
continuing to build connections and build connections.
So true. Before we go, I want to know what's on the horizon. What's next? What are you excited about? What are you building? What are you hoping for? Any of those things.
Yeah, so a lot, a lot is happening. 2025 is gearing up to be pretty interesting of a year, right? So there's a lot of highs and lows from geopolitical happenings, to say the least, and we'll see how that continues to shake out. I think there's more opportunity with more hiring and more organizations having to invest in their people. There's also
Yeah.
less of a workforce, right? So the need, for career development, mentorship, putting this together, maybe we'll do a follow-up session in 18 or 24 months, and we'll talk about some of these other, goals and pieces, right? So continue to provide the software to organizations that care about their people, more speaking opportunities, right? I love, getting up on the stage and being able to inspire, energize, and show what's possible for people, working on a second edition of the book and a couple of other cool learning kind of concepts to really break down all of these great things that we're talking about, so that whether your organization's investing in you or not, reach out, because we have some ideas, because Latitude was truly created so that no one has to navigate their career alone.
Love that. It's all about finding your place, your roots, growth. That's my best attempt at a farm joke.
Well done. I love it.
Thank you. Pete, thank you so much for your time. It has been a true pleasure getting to know you and understand all of the things that are driving a special company and product that's going to influence so many others in other workplaces.
Thank you so much. And if there's one last piece at the end here,
Yes.
Lauren and the team put a lot of time into this, so please take a chance, take a moment, and comment on her post and where you see this, and if there's a follow, subscribe, connect to help make this hard work a little bit more impactful. And who knows, because of your engagement and activity, you do not know who else may see and benefit from your support.
Thank you for doing the marketing for me. That is the nicest thing that anyone has done for me.
Of course.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks for joining us on Getting Personal, brought to you by lifestyle benefits experts at Compt. Remember, you can always find more stories and helpful insights on our LinkedIn and blog.